welcome to the podcast, the writer of comics like Fantastic Four, of The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, of the currently heartwarming and devastating Krypto the Last Dog of Krypton, a miniseries from DC, and author of books like How to Invent Everything and How to Take Over the World. Ryan North, welcome to Friends from Work.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh man, thanks so much for making the time. There are so many facets of your career to cover here that it's almost hard to figure out where to start. But because a lot of people may not know this, I was interested to hear how someone that has a master's in computer science becomes a comic book writer.
Oh, it's super easy. Then what you do is you go to school for the first 25 years of your life, basically. And then when you graduate with all this knowledge about computer science and computational linguistics and things like that, all you have to do is fail to get a job. It's super easy. You slide right into it. I mean, that's the joke answer, but it's also the true answer. It is that I never had this big, moment of quitting your day job that people talk about, because I was doing dinosaur comics, my webcomic, throughout all of grad school. I started my last year of undergrad. And by the time I was finishing my grad degree, I was like, I would like to keep doing this. So doing the comic, I mean. So It's a very easy transition. And, it comes in handy. I made Squirrel Girl a computer science student. So that was I could write that. I knew what that was like. And there's one panel in the Squirrel Girl Beats Up the Marvel Universe graphic novel where she has an assignment. If you look at her computer screen in that panel, there is an actual question for one of my assignments. Maybe it's the answer. I don't remember. It might have been the answer.
Oh,
that was mine. I could share it. But yeah, it came in entirely useful and practical.
Wow. I did, as I was reading back through Squirrel Girl ahead of this, I think, I had flagged that when I was first reading it, but I don't think at the time that I knew about your background. But the whole conversation she has, maybe in the first issue, about why she's picking a major, seemed very intentional. So I appreciated that.
Yeah, she already knows about squirrels. She's not going to go to school to study squirrels. She's going to go to study computer science. But I mean, the other thing behind that was that when I was in school, and this was, 20 years ago now, there were 3 women in my class, which was crazy because, there's nothing about the computer sciences that are bespoke to men. It was just cultural. And so I was very happy to, show this young woman who was a really good computer science student and also like showing all the cool stuff that you can do with CS.
I'm curious, with Squirrel Girl, was that a book that you pitched to Marvel, or was that a book that they were trying? I mean, because it feels so specifically Ryan North, especially in retrospect, that I don't know what that book would have looked like otherwise.
A bit of both. My editor on that, Will Moss, emailed me and said, Ryan, do you have a pitch for Squirrel Girl? And I was like, isn't she the one who talks to squirrels? Is that the one we're talking about? I didn't really know much about her. And so I said, well, give me the weekend. I'm going to read all the Squirrel Girl comics there are. And there weren't that many, like only a handful because she was new. And a background character up at that point, basically. She never had a starring series before. And I always say by the end of that weekend, I knew 2 things. I knew that I really wanted there to be a Squirrel Girl comic, and I knew that I really wanted to be the guy writing it. I saw there was a lot of potential. You start imagining what the stuff this character could do. In that first issue, she has her theme song that's the Spider-Man theme song with different lyrics. And that came from me just repeating Squirrel Girl, Squirrel Girl, Squirrel Girl, Squirrel Girl. Like it slides into it so easily. So it did, I think all books end up reflecting you in different ways, but Squirrel Girl especially, it feels very much like a Ryan and Erica book for the first 31 issues, and then a Ryan and Derek book, which is nice. I mean, there was a time when Marvel and DC only published things in the house style. Everything looked the same, and now we're in a place where you can have a book that feels unique amongst all the other books. And it worked out. That book, when it ended after 5 years and 58 issues, was the longest running book Marvel had that didn't have Star Wars on the cover. Like it had
Oh,
legs that
wow.
no one expected. Yeah.
I mean, it's such a delight to read that book even now, in a way, because it stands on its own. Like there are things that happen there that kind of reference what's going on in the wider Marvel universe, but it really does feel like those are books where I mean, it takes a bit to read them, which is nice, especially with kind of the footnote captions at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it feels like each one kind of has a lot to it, a lot of jokes, but also there's like a significant amount of plot in each issue, where it doesn't feel like it's just kind of always moving the ball forward towards the next, whatever the next arc is. With a book like that, where on the one hand, it does feel almost like it operates in its own universe and kind of plays by its own rules. Like, for instance, Kraven the Hunter can show up and he doesn't need to talk like J.M. DeMatteis. You can have fun with Kraven the Hunter and not ruin
Love
whatever's
Craven.
going on in Spider-Man world. But then on the other hand, you cover so many elements of the Marvel universe, and it really feels in some ways like kind of a romp through the comics universe. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you're approaching that, how did you decide which elements of the Marvel mythos to include, and what did your research process look like for that?
So I'll tell you a secret. If you look at the first couple villains that Squirrel Girl goes up against, with the exception of Kraven, because I always love Kraven, it's Galactus, which I had seen in a Marvel movie. It is
Mm-hmm.
Whiplash, which I had seen in a Marvel movie. I had to get up to speed on these things pretty quick. And so as she's moving through the Marvel universe, in some way, it was also me moving through with her. I mean, Galactus in that point, he was great in the most recent Fantastic Four movie, but when I was writing the book, all we had were the bad versions. But I always
Right.
liked the idea of a big hungry guy. Like that was there for my first pitch. In fact, the first pitch I gave for the book, it was just Squirrel Girl versus Galactus, that first arc. And Will wrote back and was like, okay, this is cool. Does she have a supporting cast? Like, are there other people? And I was like, oh, right. Yes. That's something a professional writer would do. And so that's where Nancy and Coy Boy and Chipmunk Hunk and eventually Brain Drain all came from.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of reading comics, which is the best form of research. It was some scanning Marvel wikis. And I've said before, and I stand by it, that if there's anything that you don't like in Marvel comics, if you can change the fan wikis about it, other writers will read that and they'll think it's true and they'll go with it. And
That's
I said this as a joke, and then I just found out that the Riddler has like a driver's license in the Batman movie with an alias, and that alias was taken from a fan wiki, and that fan wiki update was from a fan putting his own name in 12 years ago. So he vandalized
incredible.
his way into becoming DC Comics canon. So this could happen. This could be you.
Wow.
I understand there used to be internal databases, but they weren't kept up to date as well as the fan ones were. And so now everyone just relies on the fan stuff. So you too hold the future of the Marvel and DC universes in your hand, thanks to
It,
writers doing research.
that's yeah. I feel like that internal database at Marvel has to just be Tom Brevoort at this point.
He is invaluable.
It seems
I was
like it.
doing not to jump around too much, but I was doing a Fantastic Four issue where I wanted them to shrink down to microscopic size, to subatomic size, really.
Mm-hmm.
And he read the pitch, was like, you should use the Reductocraft from the 70s. Stan Lee named it, and I was like, awesome name, Reductocraft. I will absolutely use that. I missed that in my reading of Fantastic Four. I haven't read them all. But having an editor who has that encyclopedic knowledge of everything is just invaluable in letting you have those deep cuts and preventing you from screwing up too badly.
Yeah, man, I'm always impressed. I, up until recently, was always reading Tom's newsletter, and there were things he would write about that I didn't even really particularly care about, but I liked reading him write about them because he seems to he's so passionate about it and knows it so well. I think, listening to other interviews, your first introduction to comics was more through the DC avenue, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Both introductions. The first one, I think maybe I ever read, was a Wonder Woman comic that Santa gave me in my stocking. And it was part 3 of 7, and I was completely lost. Like, I couldn't follow it at all. I like the idea of comics.
Right.
So much so that when I graduated high school, got a job, with my first paycheck, I went to the local comic book store and just, bought books effectively at random. And 2 of them were good, and 1 was horrible. And I was like, if I walked into a bookstore and grabbed 3 books at random, I don't think I'd love 2 of them as much as I love these 2. And so I just kept buying books. And then I think to some extent now too, DC is much better about, here is a book that is a story. Marvel tends to be more like, here's a volume of Fantastic Four, here's a volume of Spider-Man, but it doesn't really call it like Spider-Man, the octopus conspiracy, that you can pick up and go, aha, this is the story of the octopus conspiracy. So initially it was a lot more DC, so I just felt like an easier on-road to that. And I think of that a lot when I'm writing.
Yeah.
I always keep in mind that every book is someone's first, and it's great that we have recap pages now. I wouldn't have been lost if I had that when I was a kid. And, there's that rule that once you see it, you can never unsee it, of you want to name check your characters in the first couple pages. So you'll always have the characters drop each other's names, and sometimes actual names or superhero names in those first couple pages, that if you're reading this book for the first time, you know who Mr. Fantastic is. And
Right.
it's not the level of like the 80s or the 70s where they would explain each other's powers to each other all the time.
Right.
It's like, as you know, Cyclops,
any issue of Secret
my
Wars.
adamantium claws will cut through this. And my strange optic glass, Wolverine, will blast through this door.
I think that's something that that really does set your Fantastic Four run apart as well. And I think one thing that's interesting looking at Squirrel Girl and then Fantastic Four is like the big ongoings that I associate you with at Marvel. One, you talk about a character that didn't have that many issues prior to that. There just wasn't, it was more of a blank slate. But when you turn to Fantastic Four, obviously that's kind of the core of the entire Marvel Comics universe. And
Yes.
You've got some titans that have worked on that book, both from the very beginning, obviously, with Stan and Jack, and then even very recently, whether it's like Wade and Ringo or Jonathan Hickman's stuff. So when you had the opportunity to jump on Fantastic Four, at that point, how familiar were you, as someone that didn't necessarily grow up reading Marvel Comics, with the Fantastic Four comics? And what did it look like to, like, I imagine it would be really overwhelming to just read every Fantastic Four issue.
Yep.
But also I would think, want to make sure that you're not retreading ground. So what does that process look like, getting ready to take on a property like that?
Yeah. So initially I didn't have a lot of knowledge of Fantastic Four. I'd read a couple of their appearances. I loved, I believe, the second issue where Reed solves the problem by hypnotizing squirrels into cows. I was like, interesting.
Oh,
Tell
man.
me more about this person. But I didn't have a ton of knowledge. And so the same thing, Tom asked me if I had a pitch for Fantastic Four, and I had to say, give me the weekend. And I read a bunch of comics and tried to figure out what was interesting about these characters. It doesn't take long. I mean, there's a reason we've been talking about these people for 65 years. It's because they're interesting, and they're fun, and they're cool, and they can do crazy stuff. But I had discovered writing Star Trek comics that you can actually know too much. Because I have seen every episode of Star Trek except for one of them. I felt like I knew everything. And then when I sat down to write Star Trek comics, I kept hitting this wall where I was like, well, I can't do this because of something that Spock said in 1967. And I can't do this because something that Geordi said in 1991. And it took so much more effort than I was expecting. And it made me realize, like, oh, you can know too much about this. So I read the first, I don't know how many issues, a whole bunch of them. And then I'd skip ahead to major events, major arcs, major things in their history. But I didn't want to know all of it, because I felt like you get to be hitting diminishing returns very quickly as a writer. And also, I didn't want those walls that I had with Star Trek, where I can't do this story because, there was that one issue in 1971 that kind of treads a little close.
Mm-hmm.
But also, Fantastic Four, like you hinted at there, is absolutely terrifying because everything you do is in conversation with these great creators that have come before. And I absolutely thought that this would be a very short run because for a
Hmm.
long time, the FF have had big cosmic epic adventures. And here I was being like, I want to do some short stories, weird sci-fi stuff, single issues. It was very
Mm-hmm.
different than what came before. And I thought, okay, well, I'll do 6 issues, maybe 10, and it will feel like a nice amuse bouche before whatever they go to next. Thankfully, people liked the short stories, and it's allowed me to, do the book for 33 issues, and now a new run starting real soon, or real soon in the past,
Yeah.
real recently. Time is a flat circle. Um, so it's fun. It's hard. I kind of call it doing comics on hard mode because
Hmm.
I realized on issue 3, there's a reason why no one does short stories, new full stories every issue. It's so much more work. You need a premise, you need
Right.
a twist, you need some cool power stuff, you need some family moments, some character developments. You've got 20 pages to do this in, and you have to do it again every month. And when you're doing 4
Yeah.
issue arcs like I did on Squirrel Girl, or 6 issue arcs like most people are doing, you have to think of a new story once, twice, or 3 times a year. I'm doing it once a month generally. So it's harder. It feels more like sprinting than running, but we kept up so far, and it is
Yeah.
rewarding and interesting in that, like, I still feel like I'm just starting out with these characters. There's so much stuff we haven't done. There's so much ideas we haven't explored because there is such a depth to these people, and they have all these relationships with each other. Like, it's called Fantastic Four, but there's 9 main characters on the book,
Right.
and that's just in their immediate family.
Yeah. Yeah. Dan left you with some new toys to play with, but also a very much expanded cat, especially from what Chip got to do whenever he was
He only had
on
2
the
of them.
book.
I mean, that's a sort of peek behind the curtain. The first thing I decided was I'm going to get rid of all the kids for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And that was to focus on the central cast of the 4, but also B, it gave me a chance to figure out who these people were. Because I don't think you can write a team book, and the Fantastic Four is absolutely a team book. You can't write a team book without caring about the individual members of the team, and you can't care about the individual members of the team unless they each get a spotlight. So
Mm-hmm.
the idea was, let's split them up. Let's do a Ben and Alicia issue. Let's do a Reed and Johnny, or Reed and Sue issue. Let's do a Johnny issue, and then bring them together for issue 4. So we care about them. And then after a year, we can bring the kids back and do the
Yeah.
same thing with them, get them up to speed with the reader, so that when you see them, you're like, oh, great, I love those people. Not, here are
Mm-hmm.
9 strangers. Hope you like them. Not that
Yeah.
people would start reading Fantastic Four the first time with my book, but some are. And
Yeah.
it gave me the chance as a writer to also find the voices of these characters. So I had a full month to think about Johnny Storm. I had a full month to think about Reed and Sue, instead of having just 1 month to figure out who these 9 people are and how they sound and how they talk to each other. Like, I made it easy on myself by getting rid of them for a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it is. I think sometimes when you start, the way I see big runs often start with kind of a whole new villain and this big threat, and that's kind of the way that you can drive the narrative forward, but also kind of make it feel different from whatever was immediately prior. But with that, I think you sometimes get more of the focus on like whatever the new crisis or looming threat or villain is, and it takes longer to start getting the kind of moments that I think you're talking about getting in the early issues of your run, where we did really get to spend a lot of time with those characters. And in a way, it feels the most like those Lee Kirby issues of any modern Fantastic Four run that I've read. I would say like Mark Waid's is probably second there, but just in that, those always kind of felt like it was them doing a new thing every every time, and we kind of got new. You saw the characters kind of develop, and they figured out like, oh, we need to change Sue's power set because it gets really boring just having her be invisible while everybody else is fighting all the time.
Yeah.
And you get to see all of that. And I do think that the way that you've approached that book, it's so different even from like what Hickman did, where he's like doing this sprawling saga that, goes on and concludes 7 years later or whatever in Secret Wars. But as I started reading How to Invent Everything, I started thinking about how, like, I don't know that the ideas in the book always translate directly to certain issues, but I started realizing like you are approaching, it seems as though a lot of the issues of Fantastic Four are ways for you to let these experiments kind of like play out like in kind of pseudoscience, but also real scientific.
I took something from Squirrel Girl where the computer science was always real, absolutely real, grounded, actual CS. And, meanwhile, she's hanging out with a brain in a jar in a robot body and fighting the Asgardian god of stories. So I thought, okay, we'll do comic book fantasy, but actual computer science. And for Fantastic Four, I've been trying to do, not necessarily grounded, but science fiction stories. And what separates, in my mind, science fiction from fantasy is that you do have the rules imposed on by reality, by actual science. So yes, this is a world of, stretchy guys and fire guys and rock guys and invisible women. But you can tell a story about mortality or basically anything. And as long as you keep that science grounded as much as you can, like I'm thinking now of the arc where it was a two-parter where the Earth's being hit by these invisible protons. Yes. And it turns out that they're, spoilers for this comic, they're aliens trying to escape their dying world, and they're using the relativistic speed of something that's traveling just about the speed of light to stay alive. And, all of that is real. The hollowed out protons into spaceships is comic book science because you can't hollow out 3 quarks, but everything else felt real and grounded, and it made the eventual reveal of what's actually happening, I think, really work because it felt real. So when I was starting the book, I was never going to out-slot Dan Slott. I was never going to out-Wade Mark Wade. I was never going to out-Hickman Jonathan Hickman. But by going in this different direction that hadn't really been trod much for a while, these short stories with grounded sci-fi, it felt fresher and possible. Also, it felt very hard. But I was reading, I adapted Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-5 into a comic a few years ago. And as part of that,
it was my first comic of yours that I read, actually.
Really? Well, I had some help.
It was a great introduction.
Had you read Slaughterhouse-5 already? The prose novel?
I had, yeah.
I'm always curious people who read the comic first and like, tell me what you thought. But that was the goal of that book was you don't want to read it and say, what a great graphic novel adaptation of existing prose book. You want to think, oh, what a cool comic. Like I wanted to make it feel like it was born as a comic. But anyway, I was reading Vonnegut's diaries and he was talking about, or letters rather, and he was writing to someone about how, it's so hard being a sci-fi writer in the 60s because I really missed the window in the 30s and 40s you could make a living just selling a short story to a magazine every month. And I was like, oh yeah, right. People used to do this. So I just imagine myself as a golden age sci-fi writer, and I've got this one magazine called Marvel that wants a new story from me every month. So I will send them my new story, and it's not actually impossible. It was done before 80 years ago. We'll just do it again.
Oh, there you go. Which makes me think of Breakfast of Champions, actually. But do you, when you're looking at some of these issues, and I know it probably depends on the phase of the book that you're in, because I know lately, like we'll talk about in a second, it's been more One World Under Doom oriented, but especially the earlier issues. Do you find yourself thinking of like a fun new problem or concept, and then figuring out the plot around that, or is it
Yep.
okay?
Yep. Yep. I start with the sci-fi premise. I think every time I've started with that, I have a list of like cool
Hmm.
ideas, stuff I want to explore. For example, issue 25 was this big love story for Johnny Storm with this parallel Earth. But that came from a research I've been doing for a while of like, okay, so if you assume the Theia hypothesis is true, what does an Earth that was never hit by this other planet look like? What are its properties? It's probably spinning differently. It's probably like so much change that impact. You
Hmm.
could make a list of stuff that would be different, and then I can work that into the story. Uh, so it's how I've been approaching FF is I try to start with what's the cool concept, the cool science fiction problem, and
Yeah.
then from there we get a story. Although not, I say always, I'm not sure if it's always because issue 10 was the space aliens encountering the Fantastic Four as monsters, and that
Which
was
is
the
one of my
idea of
favorite
what if.
issues.
Oh, thank you. The idea
Yeah.
there was it was Halloween, and I was like, what if you were experiencing the FF and never knew them? You've got a guy who lights on fire. You've got this like monster stretchy guy. You got this rock monster. Like a lot of it can be horror.
Hmm.
And so, okay, so how do you have people who've never heard of Fantastic Four? What if they're aliens? And then from there, it's a bit of thinking to get to they're trapped in this time warp and time's working differently. So you see all these different aspects and they become these weird, creepy monsters. You get a story about hope and what kind of universe you
Hmm.
think you live in. But that one started with more of a cool idea than a cool science fiction premise. But I start from there and I work backwards or forwards.
Well, because there's also the kind of power combo elements that I think that's one thing that I think works so well with your run because, like the longer the Marvel universe goes and the more permutations we've seen of just various character interactions, the less certain teams feel well defined. The like the Avengers, for instance, have had such a rotating roster, and the X-Men have had so many different X teams that it just
Mm,
kind of feels like everyone, people banter in similar ways. Like there was a time where Spider-Man was the kind of funny guy, but then there comes a time where sort of everyone's a little bit funny and everyone's a little like has the same kind of rhythms.
mm,
And so I think it's hard sometimes to isolate what makes a particular team stand out or what makes it true to its core. And I do think that with the Fantastic Four, having them work together, all four of them, but also finding these issues where, like, I think the like Reed and Sue being able to communicate with like invisible
Braille.
braille is so that makes so much sense and is so cool. And they're married and have been this relationship for so long when they've had superpowers, and then Alicia being in their lives for so long. And those are all things that I think really like it makes this all feel like it's a little bit more lived in, I guess, like that these are characters that are, or like these are people that are, living life together and
Mm-hmm.
progressing and kind of evolving. And so it's fun to see a premise and this kind of question or problem that has to be solved. But then the next step from my perspective, as the comic unfolds, is kind of seeing like, okay, well, like what new thing that I've never seen Reed do before is Reed now going to do? Like
And will it be some
the,
weird eyeball stuff?
I mean, it's what I appreciate though is Reed's power set is just never not going to make me feel weird to see, and so I'm glad that you just lean into it because the
Oh
the
yeah.
alternative sometimes is I think people just don't even show it because it's like we'll just make Reed the super smart guy and that's kind of his superpower. Like we won't even really deal with the stretchy stuff because how much does that even really matter? But
I
in your
love the
book,
stretchy stuff.
it matters. I love the stretchy stuff too.
Yeah. So for the Braille thing, that initially began life as a way to possibly outsmart Doom for issue 7. And I was like, it's not a satisfying ending. But I like this idea of them learning it for Alicia and having it to communicate with each other. So I had them in my back pocket until it became useful. And one of the things I did very early on is I made a list of all these, my 5 main characters of the Ben, Sue, Johnny, Reed, and Alicia, and drew lines between them all. So we could do an issue that is the Reed Johnny issue, and we then have less common stuff like, again, Reed and Johnny. We don't see them alone a lot of the time, and I like the idea that they both bring out each other's worst impulses. We're just too chaotic and left alone unsupervised. Reed and Alicia was another fun find where these two people have known each other for years, but I didn't have a strong sense of, what do they talk about when they're hanging out? What is their relationship like? Like, this is the wife of your best friend. You should have a relationship with her. So getting to dig into a bit more into those less common relationships, I think was really fun and interesting. And then when you do get to do the classics of like Ben and Johnny squabbling while they're both working at a grocery store trying to get employee of the month, it feels now like any other pairing. Instead of, here Ryan is playing the hits, it's, we get a Johnny and Ben story now. That's fun. So it's fun to explore, I think.
The Reed Alicia issue where they're at the art museum, is that the Blood Hunt tie-in?
That's a Blood Hunt tie-in, yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to talk about that briefly because I am generally not a huge fan of tie-in issues, and I don't fault them for existing. I understand why they exist. But I just think it's hard. They often kind of come in the middle of what someone's trying to do independently. Yeah.
Yeah. But if you're doing short stories,
that's true. Maybe that's the secret, because this was one that like really stood out. Or I guess, was it a 2-parter?
It was a 2-parter, yeah.
That stood out to me as just it was such a great issue in the mode of what you were doing with FF, but it also worked so well with what was going on in Blood Hunt. And like I had never, I'm sure this is something that happened at some point in Fantastic Four comics. I never knew that Reed Richards would be impervious to vampire bites because of his stretchy skin.
It makes sense that he is, though, right? Like,
it does make sense. Around it. Yeah, it's kind of rubbery.
Yeah. Thank you, because that was kind of a hard nut to crack. Because we were doing this Blood Hunt time, and I was like, well, how can we have the Fantastic Four, who, by all rights, at least 3 of them should be invulnerable to vampires? How can they get mixed up in this and not solve the problem? Like, how do you have a big problem like this vampire thing and tell a satisfying story in which the FF do not solve the problem? Because that has to happen in the main book with the characters whose story it is. So it's a lot of running around trying to crack that. I'm glad it worked out for you. The funny thing is, there's a bit there where Alicia says she's worried about the others because they're isolated from the other FF, and Reed's like, well, there's a chance that Johnny got bit by a vampire, and then the vampire knows if he flames on, he'll cure the infection from his blood. So the whole thing is them trying to trick Johnny into flaming on. And that was actually my initial pitch for what this tie-in could be. And the note from Tom, which was accurate, was, this might be not taking the event too seriously. It feels a bit flippant. And I was like, yes, it does. Okay, let me take another run at this. But as a quick aside, in the existing comic, it was a lot of fun. And it shows like these characters can be fun.
Well, and I'm curious at that point, because I'm trying to think timeline wise, that was what, summer of 24?
Possibly.
Again, time is a flat circle, but my question was, did you know at that point that Blood Hunt was going to be ending in a way that would set up an event that you would be writing, or did that come after the fact?
I'm not sure. I think it was during it where we were kind of finalizing how Blood Hunt would end, and I got there first. I was ahead on Fantastic Four. And so that speech that Doom did is something I wrote for FF, and then Jed backported it for the end of his thing. So by the time I was writing that, I knew I'd be writing the Doom event that spun out from this thing, so I could set it up nicely.
Okay, because I and for folks that did not follow with both of those events, what I'm referring to is Bloodhunt ends with Doom kind of tricking Doctor Strange into giving him the Sorcerer Supreme title, which then
in
sets
the
up
most Doom way possible. He's like, just
right.
lend it to me, and I promise I'll give it back when the world's saved. And then he solves the vampire problems. Like, but the world's not saved yet, Strange. I'm still Sorcerer Supreme.
I remember reading that, and I was like, the way that he said that. I'm also a lawyer, so I'm always like, there's some openings there. But it I mean, that has now opened up a whole new era, for you, but also for the Marvel universe, where to me it almost kind of harkens back to those Bendis days and the aughts, where it was like it really felt like the universe was tied together, like one of these big events happened and it had ramifications. And that's not to say anything negative about the events that have come since then. I just think it can be hard sometimes to recapture that unifying feeling, especially when you can only have so many like, oh, the world's in dire danger events before they start to feel less significant. But this is one that really has, from like the Joe Kelly, like 8 Deaths of Spider-Man run that leaned a lot into the Doom stuff. In Avengers, obviously, in FF. But for you, I think that has to be a new experience, because we've talked about Squirrel Girl being such its own thing, and then Fantastic Four, because they're kind of these self-contained short stories. Even though you're dealing with Marvel's first family, you're dealing with them in a way that doesn't necessarily have to involve the wider Marvel universe.
Right.
But now you're the one that's kind of driving this thing forward, and you're writing the story with all the far-reaching implications. So I'm curious what that experience has been like for you, kind of given the way that you've approached it in the past.
Yeah, it was fun. One thing I wanted to do from being their side of that table was I'd done tie-ins before, and I said, okay, so what's happening this month? And got back the answer like, well, it should be somewhere in this spot. We haven't written it yet. And it's harder to tie in when nothing is settled. And so for the Doom event, for One World Under Doom, I wrote the whole event in advance. So I could say, like, here's what's happening this month. Here's what's happening this month. So the tie-ins feel a little bit more integrated, and they're actually reflecting the world as it is. So that was my big thing I wanted to do, was be like, here's the script. You've got everything you need. My gift to you. Thank you later. But in terms of writing it, I kind of had to remind myself to take off the blinders you wear. Because I'm writing Fantastic Four, for example. I've got all the FF toys, but if I want to bring Spider-Man in, I need to, is Spider-Man alive right now? Is he dead or in space? What's he up to? You have to go ask the Spider-Man office. They're sort of in charge of his status quo. When you're writing an event, you are able to and should shake things up, so you can play with these other toys you would normally have access to and go as big as you want, do these larger stories that otherwise would be impossible in terms of organization and everything else. So that was fun. That's it's a lot of work. Absolutely. It is a lot of work. But how often will you ever get to do a Marvel event and tell a big story like this? It was kind of thing you couldn't really say no to. And I'm glad I got to play with all the toys like that.
Well, and one with Doctor Doom.
Doctor Doom.
And
you know what's great about Doctor Doom? Sorry to interrupt.
Man.
I'm just excited to talk about Doctor Doom.
Yeah.
But what's great about Doctor Doom is he is a man who has never said in his life. He is everything he does is oratory. And so when you're writing, Johnny Storm, you can't have him speak too fancy, because he doesn't speak like that, and people don't speak like that. But Doctor Doom speaks like that. Everything he does is a speech. And so you get to really like break out your A game when you're writing Doctor Doom. The example that comes to mind is in one of the One World Under Doom issues. Anyone else would say Johnny Storm is someone who was transformed by error, or Ben Grimm is someone who is transformed by error and ineptitude into the Thing. But what Doom says is Benjamin Grimm, a man by error and ineptitude transformed, because he knows how his sentence is going to end when he starts to say it. He can do these irregular constructions because he is 100% always doing a speech.
No, I love that because that actually anticipated my next question, which was how you set about finding your voice for Doom, who, you'd written before One World Under Doom, but you're one writing this event that is obviously centered on this particular character, and there are some layers to it where it's not just the evil Doom that's over the overlord of everybody and is acting as villain the entire time. For at least the first half or more of the event, it's kind of the opposite, where he's sort of gaslighting everybody a little bit.
Yeah.
And so there are some nuances there. And I feel like I would think that would add some challenges in figuring out how to capture that kind of like that tone that carries all the ego you need with Doom, while also figuring out what it would look like for Doom to win over the world, or to speak in a way that would seem to be able to kind of realistically win over the world.
Yeah, you're right. Part of the way in was sort of realizing that all Doom really has to do is offer a solution. And he can spend most of his time pointing to the problem and being like, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. Don't you agree this is bad? Doom can fix it. That's not really a solution. That's just him saying he'll fix it. He spent most of the time saying, I'll point out the problems that we all know exist. But it works. It's a great rhetorical technique. So because Doom is such a good speaker, he can do that. And I mean, I told Marvel, like the first 4 or 5 issues of this, it's going to look like Doom is winning. It's going to look like Doom is right. If you're not super paying close attention to it, you're like, oh, this Doom guy has a lot of the answers. I think I might like this guy named Dr. Doom. And that's part of the fun, right? It's like, I think if you're going to honestly do a story about someone trying to take over the world, you need to, I think, at least interrogate the appeal of that. Like, why do we want this easy solution? Why do we want this guy who shows up and says, I can solve everything if you give me enough power?
Yeah.
That's what the story's about.
Well, and yeah, I mean, because it's so much messier the way that the heroes are pushing for. There's such an efficiency to a dictatorship. And I think that is, when you say it that way, it sounds like, nobody would ever want that. But I think you've done a really good job over the course of this event of showing like how people buy into it, even when it is someone named Dr. Doom.
Thank you.
And seeing the different reactions. I guess my last question on the Doom FF front, on the Marvel Cinematic Universe side, obviously, there's a lot going on with the Fantastic Four and Doctor Doom, and you may have heard about this, but that has, I'm sure, put more focus on both of these books that you're writing. But also, it's kind of raised a question for a lot of MCU fans that are not as familiar with the lore of the Fantastic Four, because they came in with like Iron Man and move forward. Sure. You've written, even just in the course of this event, but going all the way back to Squirrel Girl, you've written a lot of the super geniuses within the Marvel universe. And because of your unique background, you're kind of, I think you do approach this, it seems, with more of a sciences background or through that lens. What do you think separates someone like Reed Richards from someone like Tony Stark, or even like Victor Von Doom, for that matter? Like, how do you keep, like, because you can imagine a world where it's just you just write when you just have the one super smart character in the scene, then that can just be the person that delivers all the really smart science dialogue. Yeah. But when you've got a lot of these people in the same room, how do you go about making sure they each have their own unique contributions and voices?
I think at that point it falls back to personality and character, right? Like the defining character trait of Doctor Doom is ego. The defining character trait of Tony Stark is also ego. They have the same motivating thing here, but where Doctor Doom has confidence, Tony Stark has charm. And so Tony Stark's he's the fantasy of the good billionaire who wants to help and is a charming guy. Doom doesn't have the charm. Doom has the presence. For Reed, he's got neither. He just has faith in the fact that the truth is intrinsically good and facts have value. And by sharing these facts, everyone will see what the truth is, and then we'll all agree on what the way forward is because we all agree on the facts. And that is I love that point of view. I think it's beautiful. Doesn't always work out for him, but it's all comes to character. And I mean, the secret to writing geniuses is that you have a whole month to figure out what they're going to say, and they do it off the top of their head. So you can have them do this really small stuff that took you a month to figure out. But that's how you write a super genius. You give yourself the advantage of time.
Yeah, it works. I do like you have that bit of Reed. I think it was at the end of this last issue, being issue number 3, as we're recording this, where even after Reed is they've gone through this process of dealing with this particular challenge that Doom has set up, and I'm not going to spoil it because it was a really great culmination of a lot of things you've been kind of building towards. But even after all of that, you still have Reed wanting to see Doom redeemed, and it feels like there's that kind of like space age optimism that's still built into Reed. Like in some ways, it seems like the Tony super genius is less a child of that era, even though he was also created in that era. Like it seems he's a little bit more. It makes sense to me that Iron Man kind of blew up in 2008. Whereas I think part of the reason I loved the recent Fantastic Four movie is that they finally felt like they could just do the thing that I think the Fantastic Four was also always supposed to do.
Yep.
Tonally.
Yep.
So I think, yeah, that makes sense that's kind of the worldview that you see Reed operating out of.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful, maybe pure way of seeing the world, right? Because we all experience the world through ourselves. And Reed's experience of the world is someone who is curious about it, and he believes that there's good in everyone because he sees it in himself. And so when he is confronted by someone like Doctor Doom, who has all these fundamental issues about him, he's like, yeah, but if you just get past that, if you just solve these things, there's a great man in there, and I see it. I want it to come out. It's optimistic, and that's the 60s retro future of flying cars and robot butlers and everything else. It's if we conquer our demons and can be our best selves, then we can build this perfect world for everyone. I don't think he's wrong. I think it's beautiful. And I love that he, despite, everything that's happened to Reed Richards and Doctor Doom throughout the years, Reed still hangs this. I don't think Sue believes that Doom is redeemable. I think she hates his guts. I'm not sure Ben and Johnny are there, but Reed absolutely thinks that Doom can be redeemed, and he will never give up hope on him or on anyone. Like that's what makes Reed Richards great. Smartest man in the world, and he won't give up hope on anyone.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like it's like Captain America being both this kind of great strategist, but also really naive about certain things at the same time, and how those kind of seem at odds, but sometimes also work together. And I think that's sort of what makes him the leader that he is. And so, yeah, I feel the same way about Reed. I guess my actual last Fantastic Four question, as you were talking, you got to visit the Fantastic Four set.
I did.
And you're unique from the other folks that visited from Marvel Comics because you were the one that was actually writing it as you were there. And I'm curious whether that, like, kind of walking in that world so to speak, if that inspired you in any particular way, if you felt like you carried some element of that back to the writing process, or if it was just generally kind of a fun excursion.
I mean, me and Chip were giggling as we were walking through the sets because it felt like they built them for me. Like, here's Retro Future's my favorite aesthetic, and here we are in these places that were real in that I could reach out and touch them, but were fake in that they didn't actually exist. Like, it takes a while to get used to that. These are full
Right.
3-dimensional sets. And I don't know, it was a really like a once in a lifetime, very, very wonderful experience. In terms of taking stuff back, I remember I had a discussion, I was chatting with Vanessa Kirby, who plays Sue Storm, and she was saying, do you see Sue as more of a mother or a sister to Johnny? And others were saying mother, and I was like, I think it's sister. I think that she will tease him in a way that a parent can't. And Vanessa was saying, oh, that's interesting, because I just the scene with him and I was feeling myself holding stuff back from him. And I was like, yeah, because he's your little brother. You got to like jerk him around a little bit. So that conception of, sister or mother is something I hadn't really crystallized, but it came out of conversation with her. And I was like, that's terrific. The biggest one was in the arts department, someone, and I wish I got their name because it's such a good line. Someone said that the Fantastic Four are people who bring the slide rule and the scientific method to a gunfight. And I was like, God damn, that's it right there. That's perfect.
That is a great line.
That crystallized exactly like, who are these people? They are people who believe in science and who believe that with mutual understanding of the universe we share, we can solve any problem.
Yeah. I mean, I love that movie ends not with a great, I mean, there is a battle element, but that's not really the original plan. The original plan is more like it's escaping Galactus. It's finding this, even the like Archimedes lever, it's a
big science experiment.
Yeah. It's so different from the way like an Avengers movie ends, where it's some great battle.
Yeah.
And it was probably, good to be on set with Pedro Pascal, because if he can make Reed Richards have a mustache, then surely you can let Johnny Storm have a mustache. I mean, we're 35 issues deep now of mustache Johnny.
Yeah, I love the mustache. The thing with the mustache is Johnny's first appearance in my run is issue 3, and he was undercover, so he had this mustache as Jonathan Fairweather. And that issue originally ended with him burning it off, shaving it off. And then I got the pages that Iban Coelho drew for this, and I had written like a Ned Flanders upper lip only mustache, and he had drawn this like Hulk Hogan trucker, like big statement mustache. And I was like, that is incredible. And so I changed the script so he doesn't shave it off. It's been there the rest of the run. And it works for two things. It works as a character thing, because it is a choice, but it's a choice Johnny made. He has a confidence to have this unpopular facial hair and pull it off. It tells you that he thinks he's strong and great and handsome and all that good stuff. And in the Doyleist sense, it works because when people don't like what I'm doing, the first thing they complain about is the mustache. And it's such a good prank, because like it doesn't sound like a credible complaint. You can just have him shave the mustache, so it instantly undermines it. They never get to Ryan's a bad writer because they're talking about this mustache a fictional character is wearing. So it's worked for two reasons. I didn't expect either of them, but I've observed that, and I think it's pretty terrific.
There's the genius. I will just say, I'm not saying that I have a mustache because Johnny Storm has a mustache. I'm just saying I didn't have a mustache before Johnny Storm had a mustache. So,
I love it.
Take from that what you will.
It's a great mustache.
Well, thank you. I haven't reached the Hulk Hogan levels yet. But also, by the way, the way that Humberto has been drawing it in these new issues is like, oh man, it's got like some real substance to it. Like that is a hefty mustache. And just in general, his art on the new issues has been a ton of fun. The last thing that I wanted to talk about, you've had such a crazy year in terms of the kind of pop culture comic book movie synergy. Obviously Fantastic Four, like we've discussed, but then I feel like Krypto, the dog, not the currency, was very much the takeaway from that movie for a lot of people. That was kind of like the thing that stuck. And then, here you come with a Krypto miniseries. Am I right that this is your first work with DC?
Kind of. I did a Kid Constantine book with Derek Charm, middle grade graphic novel.
Okay.
But this is our sort of monthly issue with them. And they came to me and said, "Do you have a pitch for Krypto?" And I was like, "Yes, absolutely." And my pitch is, let's make him a dog. Let's not see his thoughts. Let's not have him be a cartoon character. Let's have him be the more he is like a dog, the more he will seem real. Mm-hmm. And I pitched a story about a little lost dog on a strange alien world called Earth. And they were like, "This is exactly what we wanted. Let's do it." So I didn't intend to have, be writing comics to tie into the 2 tentpole releases of the summer. It was cool that it happened that way.
There are elements here that I think work so well to accomplish that exact goal of making him feel like a dog. The choice to have the letters kind of grayed out when he's not paying attention to what the people around him are saying, and then you have the dog, the words that he will recognize or care about are bolded. I love that because it's like you've seen my dog laying in the background here, and that is what it feels like when you just have a dog around all the time. It's like most of the day he's just tuning out, but there are certain things you can say that he's just immediately locked in.
Yeah.
It feels the most like kind of capturing that perspective. It also kind of gives you more of that innocence, although it also then makes issues like issue 4, which I will not spoil for people that are maybe going to read this in trade. I did appreciate you kind of giving a warning at the beginning of that issue, but man, I'm still thinking about it, and it's been like a month since it came out. So you did a good job, but also I'm kind of mad about it.
Yes. People who I could reach in my life, I was like, well, don't read issue 4 until you've got issue 5, which is coming out, I think, next week. Because then you get the happy ending after the most challenging part of Krypto's journey. But yeah, I didn't. The confession is not spoiling anything, but issue 4 is kind of a sad one. I think the spoiler alert is this is a sad one. That was always part of the pitch. I wanted it to be there, but I didn't realize until issue 1 came out how powerful it is to have a dog as your protagonist. Because I had people telling me that they cried in issue 1 when Krypto was lost. He lost his planet. He ended up on Earth all alone. And they were like, "Man, you really pulled the heartstrings on that one, Ryan." But I hadn't intended to. I thought this was table stakes for Krypto. Like, he has to come from Krypton and end up on Earth. We all know that that's his story. But when he's a dog, when your character is a dog who can't talk, you just love this little guy. And so all the emotions kind of for free as a writer get turned up to higher than what they'd usually be. I remember thinking, oh my God, if people were crying at issue 1, which wasn't supposed to be sad, we are in big trouble for issue 4, which is going to be sad. But the point of the comic is not to make you feel sad. It's that you're empathizing so much with this little guy,
right?
With this dog trying to make his way through the world and be a good boy. So I promise it'll make issue 5 all the sweeter when you get there.
Well, and I do think by making him a dog and then by like letting him be that and letting him then interact with both humans and other dogs more in the way that you would expect, I think you kind of get more of an analog to like Clark's experience trying to kind of assimilate as a human and then having those relationships and the kind of like loyalty that he feels to other people, even though like there's solidarity, but there's also a separation, obviously. and you kind of start to see that happen with Krypto, but because he is not a person that's vocalizing these things, you sort of, maybe I'm reading into it, but you see it
No.
happening, kind of behind the eyes, I guess.
Yeah.
And
I
that's
mean,
something you don't get as much when he's just the hero
no,
dog.
no, you don't. And I think that's part of what makes the comic work is that he's a dog. And yes, that means he's a silent protagonist, but dogs are so expressive. They always tell you what they're thinking. They have no guile. There's no hiding what they're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
They can't. You can tell when they're trying to hide something because they're very clearly trying to hide something. So you always know what Krypto's thinking, but how his ears are positioned, what his body language is, and that's all there in the script. And it makes him, I think, more of an emotional lead than you get even with a talking character like Superman, because Superman is not going to cry when he's hit, but Krypto will cry when he's hit because he's a dog. Like
Right.
he's hurt. He's tell you he's hurt. So it really makes it a emotional journey with him, which is great. He's a great little guy.
Well, I did not initially realize that this was a miniseries. I actually thought that it might be an ongoing until I got to issue 2 or 3.
Sorry.
And then I saw it was a mini, and I was a little disappointed. But at the same time, I always appreciate a story with, a strong beginning, middle, and end. So I'm happy with what we get. But I would love it if there's an opportunity for more work with Krypto. But also, it's kind of fun seeing you play around more in the DC sandbox. So it would be fun to see more of that come down the line as well. Although I would be sad to see
what I can do.
Yeah, just put out some feelers, Ryan.
Yeah.
Well, that is all that I have for you today. I did want to say, just as a final thank you, I mentioned your book, How to Invent Everything, just in case people aren't aware that are coming at this more from a comic standpoint. This has been such a fascinating book. It's the full title is How to Invent Everything, a survival guide for the stranded time traveler. I have always wanted this exact book because when I was growing up, I would watch like time travel movies, and I would always think like, man, if I accidentally get shot back somewhere, like I have no idea how to recreate any of the things that I like about the current world. And then I think I saw like a graphic that you made online with some of these things before I even knew that you had written a book about it. And I remember telling my wife, like, I can't believe that this thing exists. I have to get it, in part because I think it's funny, and in part because there is some remote part of my brain that believes I will somehow wind up in the situation and need this manual.
That is precisely the reason I wrote it. You're welcome. Thank you. I also was worried about that. And I think there's a lot of people like us, because I've heard that from many people who are like, I was worried about going back time, being a sucky time traveler. And I waited 20 years, 30 years for someone to write this book, and no one did. I was like, fine, I'll write it myself. But that was it. I was worried about going back in time and saying, the future's great. We have computers and penicillin. And them saying, how do you invent computers and penicillin? And me being like, I don't know. Sorry. Take my word for it.
It's been fascinating, and it's sort of doubled as dad prep as we're expecting our first kid. I was like the king of the why questions as a kid, and I would get so frustrated when my parents didn't have the answers, and so I'm really trying to trying to prepare myself, or at least have a quick reference. I can explain exactly why you can't drink that milk anymore. I don't even need my phone, even though I guess that's also an option now that my parents didn't have.
It's great for time travelers and new dads.
Exactly. See, that's the new blurb that you can put on the next edition. But
perfect.
Well, thank you for that book, Ryan, and for all of your work. I have so enjoyed adding. Every time I see a new book that you're writing, it goes on my pull list. It's one of the treats for me.
That's highest praise. I appreciate that. Thank you.
You can tell when you can tell when there's a level of intentionality that's going into books, and I feel like that's always been the case with the the stuff that you've been putting out. So I am excited to see what comes for the rest of One World Under Doom and whatever comes after that. And know that you are always welcome to come back on Friends from Work.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I look forward to doing that.
Perfect. Thanks, Ryan.
Cheers.